Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our little corner of the world here at Marco's Paper. This is a video that a lot of you folks asked for because Kate came to us and said, can you do something that says, what in the world are these inks used for? Well, we have a lot of material to cover today, and so I'm not going to waste any time. I'm going to let Chris go right ahead and start, and we'll talk afterwards about specials and such, so take it away.
Okay, we're going to start right off with one of our favorite Marco's inks, I would say, is the Distress line. We have regular Distress, and then we also have the Distress Oxide, which are the newer formulation. And Distress inks are a water-based dye ink, and you will see some neat reactions that happen when we use that water. I'm going to start off with seedless preserves, and we're going to do some ink blending. I find that Distress inks are one of my go-to inks because I can make my own background. So I don't have to search for that right color of paper. I can just go ahead and use the color ink that I want. So the next we're going to use picked raspberry. So as I'm blending, I'm going over the previous color just to kind of blend that a little bit. Now the regular Distress inks, you'll find you might have to fiddle with them a little bit as you're working. They're not quite as easy to blend as the oxides, but I tend to kind of lean back a little bit on my blending tool so I'm not getting that sponge mark on there, and that helps to blend as well. So I'm going back and forth here. Okay, and then I'm going to add my festive berries. I'm not going to do the whole panel, but just give you an idea of how that works. And back once more with the picked raspberry. So I'm pretty happy with that. The Distress colors are very bright. Okay, now, well, let me show you our final card first. Okay, so here I did use about 5 colors of the oxides, and I'll spritz with just a little water right now just so you can see. The Distress sprayer, if you just push down a little bit, you get some nice dots. If you spray entirely, then you'll just get like a light mist, and you'll be able to see that on your inks as well. I'm going to go ahead, make sure that's dry, hit it with my heat gun real quickly. And I apologize for the noise, because I'm going to do some embossing with some embossing powder next. And I'm going to use Versamark, which is a really fun, it's just a sticky ink, no color to it. Prep my ink with anti-static pad that just helps with any oils from my finger that might be there. And I'm just going to do the K for you. Versamark also leaves just a little bit of a darker mark or a watermark. So you can see that right here. If I just let that dry, that K would just be a little darker and you'd still be able to see it. But because the Versamark ink stays wetter, you can sprinkle the embossing powder over, tap it off, look to see if you have any stray powder. Just brush that off with your paintbrush. Kind of use my piece of paper there as a funnel. You really don't use much powder at all. Let my heat gun heat up, and you'll be able to see that melt as my heat gun gets hotter. So that's embossing with Versamark and embossing powders. Okay. So my final cards, this sample is the regular distress. This sample, same colors, but with the oxide. So that shows you can do the exact same thing with both inks. Dye ink, and I didn't mention oxides are a combination of dye and pigment ink. It takes a little longer to dry. That's why it blends a little smoother, and you do get like a chalky kind of look to it. I did spray both with the water, and then I did flick with some metallic paint. Okay, on to the next. Okay, another thing you can do with distress is watercolor. And I'm just going to take, again, just the regular distress, but I will show the sample that you can do both. I'm just going to tap my ink pad on my mat, add a little water, use my brush, pick up some of that ink. Now, I did not tell you, I did use VersaFine Clair in the Nocturne, which is a black color, and then I heat embossed like I did with the gold embossing powder, but I just used clear. And then all you need to do is paint with your ink. And I'm not going to finish that card, but you see how easy that is. And the embossing kind of keeps that water from flowing where you don't want it to go. And I'll show you the final. There's not quite a bit as big of a difference between the regular distress and the distress oxide, but you can see here it's just a little bit lighter. And then I did go ahead and flick with some silver distress spray stain. I'll just clean up my mat here. Sorry about the squeaks. Okay, another thing you can do with distress ink is use a stencil. And this happens to be a 2-layer stencil. A lot of companies are coming out with slimline dies, slimline stencils, slimline stamps. So we've been having a lot of fun with that. I'm just going to put a little removable tape to hold my stencil in place. To get a little red on there. I think that'll be okay. And some purple tape to hold my stencil. And this is low tack. And I'm going to try to center my stencil. Right about there, looks good. And I'm going to use a new color, Crackling Campfire, and then an oldie but a goodie, Vintage Photo. And the foams that fit on your mini blending tool just peel off. There's just some Velcro there, so you can have a sponge for different colors. So our crackling campfire is going to be the bottom layer. And you can make this as light or as dark as you want. Our second layer is the argyle that makes like the crosshatch. And a vintage photo on top of that. And I won't do all of that, but I think you get the idea. So I use the darker color on top, so that shows up a little better. And there's the regular distress and the oxide. And I did have cutouts of the leaves from this Tim Holtz set, just out of white, and I used those same colors, spritzed them again with water to get that neat water droplet effect. Use VersaFine Clair this time, but not in the black, in the pine cone, which is a really nice dark brown. Also, the different layers were just our white cougar 80-pound cardstock, which is great for inking, and I just inked all that in the same colors. So that way I didn't have to look around for the right color combinations. I just used all inks. And for our Thanksgiving die and its shadow, I used our Star Dream paper in the text weight, which cuts really well and adds a nice shine to the card. I'm just going to show you this card and just talk a little bit about it. Some dye ink another dye ink that's good for stamping is Memento. And it's also one of the few inks that you can use with alcohol markers. So what I did was I stamped the lines of this stamp, used my Misty, and I just stamped them diagonally with Pink Fresh Studios dye ink. And they have kind of color families, so I used a couple of the green, a couple of the red. But then my gnome I stamped with Memento Tuxedo Black, which is Copic friendly. So then I colored with my Copics. There was no bleeding because that is the best, one of the best inks to use with Copics. Another ink that I do not have a sample of, which is StazOn. And StazOn is really, really great to use to stamp on transparencies, plastic, anything with a slick surface. I kind of avoid it just because it has a little bit of a smell. Some people like the smell, so it's up to you. Sometimes on slick surfaces, I may use the VersaFine Clair and Clear Emboss. And I think we're just about out of time, so I'll just tell you what I did with this. I had a background stamp of that flower, which looks like this. And I used the Distress ink, the new Rustic Wilderness, and brushed just some Perfect Pearls over it, which is a special powder. And because it takes a little longer for that to dry, that powder stuck to it, and you get a really nice shine. I hope you can see it because it's just great.
Okay, thanks, Chris. I got 30 seconds to wrap up here. Here's a quick look again at all the different things that she was doing. I know you can go back through the video if you need to. Specials, any of the inks that she was using today, 20% off. Our cardstocks are also 20% off. This is all through the end of the month. Also, the new Rustic Wilderness is the new distress color. If you haven't seen that yet, if you want the whole set of those, either 8 parts or 9, you can do that. Also, as a quickie, any of the reinkers were all